one of the things I learned early on from a mentor was you have to outwork the other side. It's the only way you win a case at trial. And we worked sometimes on trials. We had one for, I guess, a major nursing chain and malpractice case that I probably worked for 4 years preparing for it. We 6 months of preparation, then we were in a trial for 9 weeks, and we were working 17 hours.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions out there. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Brad Pistotnik, who runs Bull Attorneys and Truck Accident Lawyers Group. Brad, how are you doing today?
Very good. How about yourself, Justin?
I can't complain. And when I do, nobody listens anyway. We're going to jump over and take a look at Brad's sites. He's got a couple of them. Bull Attorneys. Brad is one of the, if not the largest personal injury firm in the state of Kansas. He works beyond the state of Kansas, but he has a massive firm down there in the south part of Kansas near Wichita. And you can visit him online at bullattorneys.com. He's got some great ads with him and his partner, Tony, walking around on these giant steers with the horns. It is a sight to see. I have to always admit your theatrics, your showmanship is top notch. So I love that. If you are injured and you are in the Kansas area, or if you're injured on any of the federal highways, you need a truck accident injury lawyer. Brad is who we'll be talking with today. You can visit him at bullattorneys.com or just call 800-WIN-BULL. That's 800-WINBULL or 316 684-4400. We will have all of that down in the description below. Brad is also the proprietor of the Truck Accident Lawyers Group, which is just truckaccidentlawyersgroup.com. That is lawyers with an S, truckaccidentlawyersgroup.com. We're going to be talking with him about all of the various things he does because he has written a ton. I've actually was looking through some of his background stuff the other day when we were talking. He's got his whole blog up, and I've seen more information. I've learned more just by picking through his blog and then I've done, working with injury attorneys for the last decade that I've been doing it with. So there's some really cool stuff. We're going to dig into some of the stuff that he's really focused on, the ins and outs and the particulars of things like, oil tankers driving across the country and everything else. So that is what we're going to be talking about. But before we do that, as always, we are going to take a jump over and look at one of our sponsors. Our sponsor today is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic recently and multiple businesses were forced to shut down, had reduced hours, supply chain interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that the Congress passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It is more or less free money in the form of a retroactive tax credit that you can use for your business in whatever way you feel makes the most sense. It never needs to be paid back. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money back that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with receives over $200,000 to reinvest in their business that never needs to be paid back. The calculator is completely free, and there's never any fee unless they are successful in getting funding for you. You have less than a year to claim this money, so if you have not claimed it yet, visit nationalerc.org, get the ball rolling so you can get that money because it is free money. It is out there. And you're either going to get it or you're not. So if you haven't gotten it yet, if you had any W-2 employees during the 2020-2021 time period, you need to seek that out. Visit nationalerc.org. All righty. And jumping back over here. So Brad is who I'll be talking with today, Mr. Pistotnik. Brad is an esteemed accident attorney. And I'm losing all my notes here. He's been licensed in Kansas since I was 1 year old. And for those of you keeping track, that's since 1981. He has been licensed by the Kansas Supreme Court and the Federal District Courts of Kansas since 81. He graduated from Kansas University School of Law. Go KU, Rock Shock Jayhawk. He's dedicated his career to helping traumatic injury victims. As the CEO of Bull Attorneys PA, Brad focuses on personal injury law with a particular emphasis on commercial motor vehicles and other catastrophic injury cases. His efforts have resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements for his personal injury victims that he represents. He's also an accomplished author. He's written Truck Accidents Kill and also Divorce War, 50 Strategies Every Woman Needs to Know to Win. He's a recognized speaker. He's been presented for the Kansas Bar Association, and he's also appeared on the Geraldo show back in the day. So That's a mouthful, and I'm sure there's so much more I could say that I didn't. So question number one for you, Brad, is what did I miss?
Well, there's a lot more, but I think you summarized it very well. I mean, you have the essence of the things that I've done, other than developing this new side that's an adjunct to Bull Attorneys, which is the truck accident lawyers group side.
Okay, fair enough. So let me ask you this then. Give me your pitch. If I didn't know who you were, if I hadn't done all the research and we hadn't had previous conversations and you or I were in an elevator for 30 seconds or a minute and I said, "Hey, Brad, what do you do?" Give me your pitch. Tell me who you help specifically, where they are, and why people choose to work with you and your firm.
Sure. We have an area of concentration in commercial motor vehicle accidents, semi-truck accidents, oil tanker trucks, grain trucks, farm trucks, any type of business vehicle. But those that are licensed by the DOT and have to get a DOT license through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that is our area of expertise. They're very complex. A lot of lawyers will file, say, a catastrophic accident, and they'll basically file a petition and say that the driver was at fault and negligent for running in the back of them or failing to stop for a stop sign. We don't do that kind of lawyering. We have very complex petitions and complaints that we file a lot in federal court. The last one I filed was about 46 pages with, I think, more than 10 counts to it. It brought in broker liability, which is a very hard thing to do. So in that particular case, we had a gentleman who was in western Kansas. There'd been wind warnings for 3 days. A group of 3 semis were hauling cattle from Nebraska into Tyson Foods in Kansas, or Cargill. As they were coming through there, the winds reached 100 mile an hour, causing horrible dust storms. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Reg on hazardous weather is 392.14. And it says they're supposed to slow down, and when they become so hazardous that they stop. Nobody ever does because they're trying to get there on time. So what we did is we brought negligent hiring, negligent supervision, negligent retention claims against all the motor carriers and the broker fought the most. And as I said, I probably researched close to 100 cases nationwide before I filed that. So I wouldn't be kicked out on a 12B6 motion in federal court for failure to state a claim. And within less than 1 year after the accident happened and filing suit, settled the case for the $2 million in limits. So I don't think most lawyers move at that speed, nor do I think they understand the regulations. So I know a handful of lawyers around the country that are excellent trucking lawyers. And a lot of us meet together and we communicate on boards and things like that. But the very few of us exist in the state of Kansas.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And again, there's something to be said for being a specialist, and you seem to be a specialist in this field. And I think that that makes you guys really kind of stand out, which is awesome. We're going to dig a lot more into that here in a little bit. Let me get some background information though. So you've been practicing law since 1981, give or take. That's when you passed the bar. What got you into law in the first place? Did you grow up watching Perry Mason reruns and you just kind of knew this was what you were destined to do? Did you kind of stumble into law as an accident, and then why PI? Why?
Well, that's a big, long question, but the essence of it is my brother's a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer, my dad was a dentist. He's passed now, but his upbringing of us was you have to be a professional of some type. He wanted me to go to dental school. I assisted doing dentistry growing up and hated it. Did not want to be a dentist for any reason. I had a degree in marketing and business from the Kansas State University. I basically kind of veered towards the law group from an exam that I took to try to determine what likes most professionals have and what I matched closely. And number 1 was marketing. Number 2 was lawyer, and I can't remember number 3. So that made me gravitate towards law, and I went to KU Law School. Got out when I was 25. Uh, Briefly worked for an oil company, corporate lawyer and a landman. And then in 83, the oil business crashed. And when it crashed, I said, well, I'm not going to have that happen to me again. So at the age of 26, I just opened up my own law firm, and then we started doubling year after year after year. So it's been a long road. Presently we've got 5 lawyers, several case managers, several paralegals, and we do work in Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, Arkansas, Arizona, Utah, Illinois, Florida, and Texas. I think that's most of them.
Nice. So here's a very important question, and I need you to take this very seriously. Jayhawks or Wildcats?
That's a good question because I liked K-State and I liked KU. Probably I'd go for the Cats if I was going to have to be at a game, just because K-State was undergrad, have a lot more fun, and law school is not any fun. So you end up thinking back on the good days, and the best days are, of course, undergrad.
That's fair. That's fair. I think the correct answer is it football or basketball, right?
Yeah,
It's
well,
football,
I mean,
football K-State, basketball KU.
correct. And then in Wichita, we got Wichita State, the Shockers, but
You got the Shockers down there.
and you get professional, you got the Chiefs. So it's a mixed bag of who do you like.
That's fair. That's fair. We have some good teams in Kansas. I got to admit, I've never been a huge sports guy, but we've got some really good teams going on. I grew up, in Royals and Chiefs country, so it is what it is. Well, so let me ask you this. I was talking a minute ago. I read from our sponsor, NashvilleERC.org. We're talking about the pandemic, and this is something I like to get a feel for. And I haven't talked to a number of attorneys in Kansas about this, but obviously the pandemic hit, and ideally we're done with it. Ideally, we're not going to see that ever rear its head again. But for a lot of people in a lot of different places, different cities, different states. I've talked to attorneys in New York and Florida and Texas and Utah and just all over the place, California. And they all had very different experiences with the pandemic and the response to the pandemic. How did it affect you, and how did it affect your firm? Did you change up what you're doing? Do you think it made some changes for the better, some changes for the worse? Are things basically back to normal? Has it affected the way you guys take care of and intake clients and everything else? Tell me about your experience with that.
Yeah, it actually, COVID was different in Kansas because I have a home here in Wichita and another one in Fort Lauderdale. Interestingly, both Florida and Kansas did not use masks or require them in most places. So we didn't shut down like they did in New York and California and a lot of places, probably similar to Texas. So what happened was most of the clients would come in, but we would, if anybody was coughing, I asked them to let us know so we could put a mask on them, or if they sounded even nasally, I would do the same thing because we didn't want the whole firm to end up with COVID. And then we had a lot of different legal assistants that got sick during that process. And so we sent them home for 2 weeks because they didn't have that Paxlovid that they put Biden on recently. So at that time, you wondered what was going to happen, and it did slow down business because people, the way I measured it is because people were told to stay in their homes and not socialize. They didn't go out and get in their cars and go very far, and so that reduced the overall number of accidents that we saw in the Kansas region. Especially with trucks and things like that, because when people aren't going out, they're not getting in wrecks. Very simple. The national truck drivers are still moving, so we still had cases coming in, but until COVID was over, it was a slower existence. It went from very busy in 2019 to 2020 was a change, and then 2021. That period was just, there weren't as many vehicular wrecks, but it didn't affect our firm. Actually, we actually grew during that time.
That's fascinating. I had a attorney friend of mine who was in New York City, and he worked in one of those giant buildings that regularly saw in the 2019 and before, something like, I want to say 50 to 80,000 people a day going through it. I live in a town that's 12,000 people. It's like, 10 times the population of my entire town walking through this building. And then COVID hit. And I think they hit numbers of like 180 a day. So like and he said, he's a PI as well. He said, we lost a ton of business because nobody's getting into wrecks, which is a good thing, but it's definitely hard on business. But it's fascinating. Is if you're doing cross country stuff, you're looking at truckers and whatnot. Then I imagine there's still a lot of that sort of injury style accidents and things going on. But yeah, it's fascinating because it really did, I think, slow a lot of people down. It took a lot of traffic off the road, which I guess theoretically made the road safer. I don't know. Did you
In
ever have
theory,
to do? Oh, go ahead.
in theory, it did make the road safer, but there was a whole lot of people that were caught like on video in some of the states that were out because there was nobody on the road driving at 140-mile-an-hour plus, and then they had massive wrecks. I remember several of those I saw for California with rather stupid people driving it faster than they should be, and then they lost control.
Wow.
And it happens. I mean, there's always somebody that's going to do that.
Yeah.
For us, fortunately, um, the world has a lot of negligent drivers, especially truck drivers. And that's what we built our business on. Lack of training. They don't have training and no supervision, and they're pushed hard. So sometimes you feel sorry for the truck drivers because the companies push them, but in
Yeah.
the end, it's their fault.
I live in Kansas as well, as my listeners know, as you know. And my wife's from Pennsylvania, and we travel out there twice a year. It's 1,000 miles one way, 1,000 miles back. We do this twice a year, plus other drives and whatnot. And it's just amazing how many trucks are on the road. They really are almost half of the traffic on the road is these big semi trucks, tanker trucks, cattle trucks, just all over. And they really are the backbone of what we do as a country. They keep the country moving along. They keep the country trucking, if you will. But you have that many people. Some of them are untrained. And I do want to dig into that in a minute because you were talking about people kind of trying to fly under the radar, not have to go to way stations and everything else. We're going to dig into that here in a few minutes. But it is fascinating because they are the backbone of our country. But at the same time, you have that many people with that large and powerful machinery, you're always going to wind up having issues and having problems. Um, so let me ask you this, and this is the closest thing I asked to a gotcha question, as my listeners know. You've been practicing law, you've been doing it for over 40 years, and in that time, you play long enough, you never bat 1,000. That's just a truism of life. And I'm sure, especially maybe early on in your career, Red, you probably had some setbacks. You maybe encountered some failures or things that you would say feel like failure. Can you let my listeners know about a time that you experienced failure, experienced a setback, but what did you learn from that? And how do you carry that forward to make sure you're always giving the best care to your clients?
Well, I think I went through a horrible divorce years ago, a long time ago. Um, that gave me a horrible setback in life, and it took a long time to recover. But when I did, I came back tenfold. Um, I studied more, I learned more, um, I made myself better. So one of the things I learned early on from a mentor was you have to outwork the other side. It's the only way you win a case, a trial. And we worked sometimes on trials. We had one for, I guess, a major nursing chain and malpractice case that I probably worked for 4 years preparing for it. 6 months of preparation, and we were in a trial for 9 weeks, and we were working 17 hours a day, every single day, 7 days a week. Those things teach you a lot. That was clear back about the time of 9/11, more than 20 years ago. So when you do those kind of things, it makes you create a level of insight to how the other side works and how weak some people are that you're against and how lack of prepared they are. And one of my best friends, who's a lawyer down in um, Fort Worth, Texas, and the Dallas area, David Hart, um, he's the guy that taught me that you have to outwork the other side. And by doing that, I don't care if they're higher intellect than you, by knowing more about your case and working harder than they do, you can win. And so it taught me a very great thing. which I try to teach my other lawyers, and unfortunately, they don't always want to read medical textbooks on neurology and neuropsychology and things like that. But I've entire medical library. I've read it because you can't take a deposition of a doctor with a specialty unless you've read their textbook of what they do. And I have the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. I mean, I've written books on it. I've gave Bar Association seminars on it. And the Truck Accident Lawyers Group site we just opened up is completely a guide to any person that needs help with a truck accident where there's catastrophic injuries, and people that are lawyers would read it, and like a lot of people wouldn't know some of the stuff we're talking about. And I'll give you an example. There's a thing called the OP1, and it's an oath that every motor carrier truck driver takes to get a DOT license. And in that oath, it says they will follow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, the FMCSR, and they will only hire following those guidelines, only train using those guidelines, and only supervise using those guidelines. And David and I were talking recently about whether anyone else knows what the hell we're talking about. And he said, quite frankly, the only time the other side knows it is when we're sending out the request for production about whether or not they followed this oath. And then the lawyer has to study what the hell we're suing them over. And no one ever knows what it is. So if they're not prepared, they look at you blindly because they just don't understand these rules. And they're extremely complex. So many lawyers think they can do a truck accident case, and they bring a simple negligence claim, and all they're doing is hurting their client because they don't really understand the different levels of claims that have to be brought to get a multi-million-dollar settlement.
Gotcha. So that would affect both the plaintiff and the defendant.
It does. It does.
They need to know.
What happens is in a typical case, if you're suing Federal Express or, UPS, they have a pretty good safety program. But you get a medium-size motor carrier or a smaller carrier with 5 to 10 trucks, they've never heard of anything I'm discussing. So their answers are always just a series of admissions against themselves because nobody prepared them for this. And if the lawyer against me doesn't understand it, then they can't defend them properly. And I've got a handful of lawyers in the Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska area that all are excellent trucking defense lawyers. So every case we file, we're dealing with the same group of approximately 5 defense lawyers because they bring them in order to fight myself or our lawyers here.
You walk in sometimes like, oh, it's Frank. Hi, Frank. How you doing?
Yes, exactly. One of his name is Frank, and he's a little banty rooster. Very nice guy. As long as you're not in a deposition with him, you want to punch him if you're in a deposition. But afterwards, you can have a drink together and socialize. So it becomes a kind of an interesting way that you actually mesh together inside the deposition or the courtroom and outside.
There you go. Well, Frank, if you're watching, hello. I picked your name totally at random, but reach out and I'll have you on the show at some point. So let me ask the flip side then. I think that's a really good lesson, by the way. And I will say this, I learned that the hard way, that you can outwork somebody. And I'm gonna toot my own horn, but I'm gonna do it in a self-deprecating way. I'm an intelligent person. I took tests when I was a kid that put me in the 99.99 percentile for intelligence. So I grew up being told, you're smart, you're super smart. And I felt early on, I didn't have to work very hard. I got all the things. And we're talking like 3rd grade, 5th grade, whatever. I didn't have to work hard to get everything. And so I just told myself, I'm smart. I don't have to work hard. And then, high school and physics and chemistry and all these other things hit. And I was so used to not having to work hard that I didn't even know how to do it. And I fell behind. I became like a B, C, D student. I think I even got an F in my physics class, like my final grade in physics in high school. This is, 20 some odd years ago. But it was a kind of a wake up call for me because I realized that there are people out there that are less intelligent, like on paper, than I am. But these kids had the diligence to sit down and work and to work hard, and they would outperform me every single time because what they lacked in a little bit of, numbers on a piece of paper that said they were smart, they made up for diligence and hard work. And, it took me a long time to actually learn that lesson, but I think it's a really good lesson to learn.
Well, I
So
think I
wherever you
got,
are,
I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
no, that's fine. Just whoever you are, if you're out there listening to this, hard work, hard work, hard work, it always pays off. You can always outwork anybody if you're willing to put in that effort. And I think it's a hard learned lesson, but it's a very important learned lesson. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, in law school, there were some obvious, highly intellectual schoolmates that I had, and some of them did not have to work in order to do well on the tests and things like that. And I had to always study very hard and make the summaries of the textbooks and, meet and study groups. And as we progress through life, and I keep track of a lot of them, some of them are working in silver stocking defense firms. Very few turned into plaintiffs' attorneys, almost none. We kind of learned, there was an old joke that if you were an A student, you'd become a professor. If you're a B student, you're going to go to corporations. And if you're a C and B student, you're going to end up being a trial lawyer. That's really true.
That's funny, but I mean that would make sense because you trained yourself into the hard work, and so you fall into the one that has the most work, but probably the most payoff too. I mean, I know that, and I've always loved PI law because of the way you guys work. It's a contingency fee basis, so you find people at their worst moment in life, people that have suffered death, catastrophic injury, and they can't afford an attorney. The average rates for an attorney are between $500 and $1,500 an hour, depending upon where you are. People can't afford that, and you guys come in, you say, listen, we think your case has merit. We're going to handle it. Don't worry about it. And you don't pay us anything unless we're successful for you. I've always found that model, just amazing. And I know that people give you a bad name, you're an ambulance chaser or whatever, but you guys are filling a real need in society that I've always respected. So, and it's funny that you pointed out, because it is, you're trained into the hustle and you want the attorney that knows how to hustle. I'd rather have the B and C student attorney if he's got the hellacious hustle. He's willing to go in there and do the work and get it done. Read the 100+ cases that he has to read through, file the 50-page plus, filing or whatever it is to represent me well. So I think that's awesome. It's a good lesson. The flip side, of course, is I'm sure you've had some great wins. I was flipping through your website earlier. I saw one of the things you lead with is a $9 million verdict for an oil pump accident that basically left a man neutered for life, which is just terrible. I see, 2.6 million here, 2.4 million there, 2 million here, 1 million there. And of course, the numbers are really impressive. But I'm sure that there are some cases, whether it's the monetary aspect of it, whether it's bringing closure to somebody, there's probably a couple of cases you've had over the years, Brad, that really they're the feather in your cap, right? The things that you're most proud of. You fall asleep at night. Sometimes we think about our failures and we meditate on, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done this, whatever. But sometimes we fall asleep and we're thinking about those things like, man, I really made a difference here. I'm so proud that this happened. Can you tell me and my listeners, Brad, about one or two of the cases or experiences that you've had in your practice of law that you're most proud of?
Yeah. Without naming the defendants, because sometimes there's confidentiality, like the 9
Obviously.
million you talked about was actually a settlement after filing suit without a trial. That case was a very sad case because it was a little 7-year-old boy in an area of Kansas that's rural, that had a section of ground that had 3 oil producing pumps on it, but no fence, no gates, no locks. And the kids from the town would ride their bicycles over there, and he went over there and got onto an oil and gas pump, and it took him up one time and down. It broke his pelvis, cut his penis off his testicles. It's a bad case, but I'm proud of that because that little boy, as he gets older, will be made fun of. The 9 million won't do anything to get rid of that humiliation, but he deserves that to try to get through life. And they reconstructed the penis, testicles are gone. Some of this stuff is horrible to watch. It's just bad. So I have a case right now that I'm working on with a nice lady She was hit by a truck that blew a stop sign out in western Kansas. Should have died. She was life watched to Wichita and treated at Wesley Medical Center. And she was going through horrible grafts and things like that. And the whole thing I've been working on there is I talk to her and her husband on a daily basis, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. And that's what keeps me going, is helping those people. It's
Awesome. Again, I mean, it makes sense.
it's hard to explain. I get a little tearful with some of these cases because they're so bad.
How do you handle putting up with that? I'm sure you have to see some of the most graphic things people would ever have to watch. Most people would never want to watch these things, but you probably have to review footage, review video, review photographs of horrible accidents, things that happen to children. How do you compartmentalize that? How do you keep that from affecting you, and how do you, support your clients emotionally through that?
Well, my staff that I have has all been. I only have people that are compassionate here. And if they're not compassionate, they don't stay here very long. My wife has a degree in psychology, so she helps engage when we're in trial and helps read jurors and the jury selection process. She's very intuitive. When you're doing this type of work, I tell a lot of my friends that are not true plaintiff's attorneys, but they claim to be a plaintiff's attorney. And I say, some of these types of philosophies you have don't match to what we're doing. And if you're a true plaintiff's attorney that is actually an advocate that has been able to settle a ton of cases over $1 million and get verdicts above $1 million, then you're a different breed of cat. And there's a lot of good lawyers around the US and other good lawyers in Kansas that I'm aware of that are friends of mine. Like I'm the board of the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association, and we all meet together and share stories and things like that. But they're a different, unique group of lawyers that are different from defense lawyers. They're different from regular lawyers, criminal lawyers and domestic lawyers or corporate lawyers. And I've done all that. I've done divorce. I've done probate. Worked in the DA's office as an intern. I've done criminal defense. I was very good at criminal defense, and then I got a child molester off, felt bad about it, and stopped doing it.
Talk to criminal defense attorneys, and I've had to ask them how they deal with that. And that's one of those areas.
I could not deal with it because I felt like it was not right to help them. Mm-hmm. And the ones that I know that are friends of mine that are criminal defense attorneys that are good, they just blind themselves out to that and continue to do the work. I can't do that.
I think one of them told me, he said, all I do is I tell myself everyone under the law constitutionally deserves their trial, and I'm there to give them that trial. And I think they view it as a form of justice to make sure that even the worst cases get, their fair hearing. Like I would represent Hitler if I had to, they would say, because they want to make sure everyone gets their fair hearing. And I guess I can get on board with that. I respect the dedication to the abstracted vision of justice in that scenario, but I do think that I would have a hard time in certain situations, especially if I knew that I helped somebody who probably should be off the streets get back out onto the streets. But no, we're not here to talk about.
Everybody deserves a constitutional defense. I don't care who they are. I can do it. I just don't like doing it when I think somebody's not a good person. There's not much point to me in my life to help bad people get out of jail. It just isn't it's not a focus of my personal morals and philosophy.
There was a whole movie about that. It was Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, The Devil's Advocate.
Yes, that's a good movie. But I mean, the truth is you get my good friends that are really excellent criminal defense attorneys. They become hardened to that fact, and to them it is about this guy deserves a constitutional defense. That's why we went to law school, and I'm going to give that to them. And I respect them for that. But then there's the other side of the lawyers, the plaintiffs ones that actually are true plaintiffs attorneys that are advocates. And I think there's a difference between a trial attorney, and an advocate. So an advocate will do anything they can for their client to help them. They're very compassionate. They want them to win. They feel an empathy for the clients. And that's where a lot of lawyers lack. They can sympathize, but having empathy is harder. And once you have empathy, then you can be a better lawyer.
So it makes sense. You would have to have, I think, as a plaintiff's attorney in PI, you would need to have a lot of, excuse me, a lot of empathy. But I guess, yeah, it would be tough to find that balance if you're doing criminal law, I think. Anyway, again, we're not here talking about criminal attorneys, but we are here to talk about the law in general. And I'm sure in your 40 years of law, you've also encountered some absurdities, just things that make you shake your head. You can't believe it turned out this way. You can't believe they're making the claim they're making. You can't believe the scenario played out the way that it played out. I'll mention this, we're living in the wake of assassination attempt on President Trump. And regardless of how you feel about the man, everyone that's reviewed the footage said it is absurd that he survived it, but he turned his head at just the right time. And everything played out totally differently because he turned his head at just the right time. What have you encountered in your practice of law that hits you like that? You're like, how did this happen the way that it happened? Or maybe it was a ruling against you or for you or whatever it is. What's some of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law?
And when I was very young, because I didn't I didn't do it the traditional way, which you go join a law firm, you're then mentored, you're an associate, junior, then you become a senior associate, then become a junior partner. I remember a lot of lawyers in Wichita saying I was giving away free consultation. They said, you're going to go under doing that. Well, they proved them wrong. The point is that those people that need help can't afford to hire a lawyer. And the absurdities that you see are the lawyers that refuse to help lawyers unless they're paid an hourly fee of, as you said, 400 to as high as 2,500 an hour, depending upon the area. I see a lot of absurdity with the legal system, the justice system, because there's an old boys network in every single state. Anybody that doesn't admit that's a liar. That old boy network works in the favor of huge defense firms. And I can't even tell you some of the things I know because they would shock anyone. But I've seen people get treated so unfairly because some large partner in a huge law firm, a defense firm, is the campaign manager for this judge. And there was just a big expose on conflict, like with Justice Thomas, of what happens when they're taking trips and things like that. That is a real everyday occurrence, not with all judges, but it happens everywhere, and it happens, and it should never happen anywhere. So, it should be about justice. I think there was a movie that I loved, which was Justice for All, and it was trying to describe the ludicrous nature of some of the justice system and making fun of it. And the truth is that there is a lot of unfairness in the entire universe in legal arenas, whether you're in the US or in France or Germany, it doesn't make any difference. There's just a very huge disparity in people that are able to get justice and have a lawyer that can get them justice, because at least half of all lawyers can't get any justice for anybody. And it's more about making a living. They don't care about the clients. They shouldn't be practicing law. The ones that care about their clients and that empathize, sympathize, work for them, help them, are the ones that should be doing this work. Because if you don't care about your clients, you shouldn't be a lawyer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to dig into some of the general knowledge that you have, because you and I were talking, and I've already referenced this in this call, in this interview. We travel across the country a couple times a year to go see my wife's family. We spend most of our time on I-70. We do that intentionally because I-70 is a major highway, 4 lanes the whole way out, lots of good truck stops, well lit. When you're traveling with, 5 kids, it makes it easy to get in and get off, get everyone go to the bathroom and get back on. But one thing I never really truly considered is how much safer those kinds of highways may be as opposed to a lot of the smaller, US highways, but not interstate highways or federal highways. And you were talking about when we were talking the other day, you'd mentioned something that really stuck in my head ever since, and it's that a lot of these mid-sized or smaller trucking guys, they'll try to skirt the law in various ways. They'll use smaller highways, they'll two-lane highways. They do that for a variety of reasons, like avoiding way stations. Can you talk more about that and just kind of open up that realm for a lot of for my listeners, help them
Sure.
understand what you're saying to me?
I think what you just, um, the point you're talking about is the reason why most trucking accidents occur. There's a vast difference between on a federal highway where you have a 4 lane with a median and a divider. You still have bad wrecks on those. Don't get me wrong. You can have a we had a case out of Kentucky that there was like 15 cars that got hit from one guy that was not paying attention, hit them all at 70 mph and killed one of our clients. And it was a bad wreck. Um, but most of the time, the reason this happened, there's only one reason for it. And actually two, I would say that. One is on-time schedules that punish the truck driver if they don't pick up and deliver the property or the passenger at an exact time. They can lose their jobs, be terminated or suspended or monetarily punished. The second is making the drivers go over hours. So you've got your federal maximum hours of driving time in a 7-8 day period and so much per day. And so a lot of these truck drivers are pushing themselves to go as far as they can because they're paid by the mile. And if they're going to get detected without a logbook or it's false logs, which happens a lot, even with electronic logs, it hasn't changed that. They end up taking 2 lane roads, like going through Kansas, looking for the roads with no tolls, limited police, limited speeding radar traps, limited way stations. And that's where they kill people. I mean, literally. And so the more chance you get of that, like you've got trucking routes from as far as North Dakota going to Texas for cattle routes, and come down 83 and 183 and 283 through Kansas, and then you've got 50 and 56 coming across from the east to the west, going all the way to some of them to California. These drivers know which routes they can go the fastest, the longest without stopping and get by with violating the law. In fact, there was a guy I was talking to that he joined a trucking board and they thought he was a trucker. And one of the guys was joking about, he says, it's really something when I don't violate the FMCSR every single day. He was bragging about it. So the ones that don't care at all are the ones that cause misery, death, and injuries. And those are the ones we have to protect people from. So when you do that, the only way anybody's ever going to learn is if they have a huge monetary award that makes them add a safety protocol. So if they don't follow safety protocols and they don't follow the federal rules, then catastrophic injuries happen all the time. And so I look at why those happen, and it doesn't mean that the bigger companies don't have that happen. They do, because you've always got somebody that's not going to follow those rules. But the smaller the company, the more there's a policy of you have to do on-time delivery at any cost. We really don't care. Just we don't want to know about it. So they turn a blind eye to that, and then people die.
Do you think the rise of autonomous driving vehicles is going to change that? Do you think I mean, supposedly they're logging better driving, on an hour per hour, man hour driving schedule. They're far less likely to wreck, but they're going to be far more likely to follow the rules. Do you think that's going to change things drastically?
No, I think it's going to complicate everything because then instead of suing the driver, you've got to sue the company, you've got to sue the software engineer, the programmer, the subcontractors that make the parts, and you turn it into a huge product liability claim. which means people will not be compensated quickly. And a lot of lawyers just won't do the work when that happens. Could robot drivers in theory drive better? Yeah, but if you remember 2 or 3 years ago, there was two guys that went out to drink all night, decided they were going to get in their Tesla and they sat in the back seat while they're drunk and told it where to go, and something glitched and it sped up and it went into some trees and it super ignited because of the batteries in the vehicle.
Batteries.
And they were burnt to a crisp. So we aren't yet anywhere close to that day and age. I don't know. I'm 68. Maybe by the time I'm 80, but that's a long way away. I wouldn't feel safe sitting in a vehicle without a human element to it, overseeing it.
Unless it's on rails. And even then, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe someday we'll be like in some of the Schwarzenegger and
The
futuristic
Jetsons.
movies, but I don't think we're there yet.
No, I would agree with that. It's fascinating to see it coming down the pipeline, but yeah, I would agree. We're definitely not there yet. Shoot, I had a secondary question that was related to that. I don't remember what it was now. You chase two birds, you lose both, right? Well, let me ask you this on a related question. What other changes have you seen that have really, in the last 2, 3, 4 decades? What changes have happened in the legal field that have affected the way you do your job? Things from dash cams to social media, maybe. I don't know if that ever plays a role. What kinds of things are affecting the way that you represent your clients or the types of cases that you're seeing that your clients are bringing to you?
Well, dash cams, that's an interesting topic because we don't find very many private drivers using them, but some truckers do in order to protect themselves from liability. And I've seen some amazing footage of idiotic crap. Like one of the clients here had two motorcycles racing at over 100 mph, and they both hit his car. And then you could hear the crash. And he said a few cuss words right immediately thereafter. And it was very clear, it shocked him, and it was all recorded. For us in the trucking industry area of litigation, the big issue is a lot of these trucking companies have those cameras and they won't turn them over, or they'll delete the information before we get it. So we find that if we don't do an immediate spoliation letter to stop them from destroying evidence or driving their truck and overriding the EMC modules, then, which happens a lot, so the minute I'm hired on a case, we get a detective that goes and looks for surveillance videos, dash cam videos. We hire an accident reconstruction expert. We fly to the scene. We have our own corporate aircraft, a jet here. If I've got to go cross country in it, I can be there in 3 hours. So when we do that, I have a client that was hurt out in Western Kansas. They life watched him to Goodland. He called me for help, and we were there, the next day. And we started doing immediate discovery and investigation, and it stopped us from losing a lot of evidence. So what happens is, like, we just had a case yesterday where a case manager got the police report in, brought it to my attention. It didn't come out like our client told us. It'd been 3 weeks, so the police are behind in Wichita right now because the system was hacked. And so the police reports started coming in late. And by then, most of the business surveillance video overwrites itself as fast as 7 days. So we found that if we don't do an immediate scene investigation the same day or within 72 hours, you're going to lose all your critical evidence. And a lot of the normal people don't know that, or they're in a hospital. And there's no way to convey that to them through any means of communication or advertising, because I think they'd be bored by it and wouldn't listen to it. So it takes somebody picking up a phone and making the call and asking, how can you help me? And that is, there's too many people. And the other, you said, what's changed is we routinely see lawyers from all over the country flying into Kansas, and they're buying police reports and they're soliciting them, and they'll get on a plane, fly in to meet them, sign them up. Some of them will buy them a new Cadillac if they hire them. So that level of solicitation of lawyers, I find to be horrible, but I have a lot of competitors doing it, and I've caught them at it, and it's just strange that they do it, but we don't need to. It's the biggest change that happened from technology, I think, is the use of the cameras inside the trucks that have a mechanism that if the truck has any type of an abrupt movement, one direction or other, stop or accelerate, it takes pictures of the driver and of the roadway, and then it's sending them by satellite to the company headquarters where somebody's looking at it. I can promise you, I haven't found 1% of the companies using that technology, because it proves when they're negligent, and it proves when they're not supervising. So a lot of them, they say it's because they can't afford it, but the truth is they don't want to be caught violating the FMCSR. And so they just don't use the technology that's there. So the technology is available to protect us, but if the companies aren't going to use it, especially when I say medium-sized company, I'm talking about a company with 250 trucks or less, or 250 drivers or less. That's a medium-sized company. And you see the worst of the worst starting at 300 drivers down. And the less they've got, the more unsafe it becomes.
It's interesting because obviously the national carriers are going to have thousands and thousands of drivers. In my head, 250 drivers, 250 vehicles sounds huge, but I guess when I think of a small company, I think a guy with like 3 trucks or something like that. But I guess it would make sense that in that range, you're still in that lower level where you're still living in the margin and trying to eke out whatever profit you can. You're trying to hit the deadlines and whatnot. So that's fascinating. But speaking of major carriers, we also talked briefly the other day, and so I want to get your opinion on the record about one of the big changes that's come about in the last decade really is ride shares, Ubers, Lyfts, Uber Eats, etc. How is that? What kind of cases are you seeing when it comes to those kinds of drivers? Is that a unique breed of case? Is it really just your standard commercial vehicle accident? What are the ins and outs of an Uber case or a Lyft case?
Uber cases, just like Uber and DoorDash, the food delivery system, it's all very unique and it's very similar. Most of the companies carry higher limits of insurance coverage because of laws, like $1 million if they hurt someone. I just attended a kind of a closed group of Uber lawyers that do trucking litigation and Uber work. And one of the guys was talking about the fact, he says, next time you're in an Uber, ask the guy or woman that you're driving with, did they ever have an in-person interview? Did they get any safety training? Did they have to take a test? Why are they using the Google or the Uber map to go where they're going to take deviations? And you find quickly over the last 2 years, I've asked every single Uber driver I get in with and Lyft driver if they ever got any training on safety or defensive driving, accident avoidance, hazard perception. All say 0. I said, did they even offer you something to look at in order to get safety training? 0. And half these people, if they can breathe and they've got a driver's license, they get a job. So what you have, I was down in Florida, going down I-95 in an Uber with a Haitian, and there's nothing against Haitians, but this guy, I-95 between Fort Lauderdale and Miami is now 6 lanes on either side, and we were only going 4 miles, and he started zigzagging at a 45-degree angle, and we almost got hit 3 or 4 or 5 times in less than 2 miles. And I was in the front seat, my wife and child were in the back seat, and I looked over at him and I said, sir, I said, I don't know what you're doing, but I've seen 4 cars screech to a halt trying to avoid you, and you're going to kill us or you're going to kill someone else. So if you don't pull back in the right lane and pull onto Broward and stay here where I tell you, I will get on the phone right now with Uber and have you fired before we get to my house. I said, so pull over the right, stay there. And if you can't do that, stop the car somewhere safe and let us out. And he straightened up and did that. We were in Miami coming back, and this guy who was from Venezuela, a kid, he entered the highway going the wrong direction at about 1 a.m. And lucky for us, I mean, it was a miracle, there was a Miami police officer nearby who pulled in front of us, blocked the car, and a second one arrived, put their lights on. And the interesting part was, instead of giving him a ticket, he pulled up next to him once the traffic cleared, and he goes, "What the hell is wrong with you? Turn around and go the right way." That was the only warning given to him. And so if you're in an Uber or a Lyft, and you have an unsafe driver, you need to be let out at the closest location safely where you can actually get away from the drivers, because they're very dangerous. Not all of them, but I find that about, I would say 75% of them are dangerous. So we see a lot of wrecks that are very bad with those. And I see we've got an image up here right now. Is that where we're looking at?
This is India, but
Yeah.
I've seen similar pictures or similar videos of driving in places like Haiti. You mentioned nothing against Haitians, and I agree, nothing against Haitians as people. But when you come from an area that has far fewer road regulations, and you come to America and you're like, I'm going to drive like I did there. I mean, I've seen, this is a clean video. There's no accidents or anything, but I've seen videos like this. And you're like, how is nobody dead? Like, there must be 10 fatalities on this particular road every single day because they're in and out. And this actually looks far more orderly than what I was expecting. But I pulled it up while you were talking, just because when you mentioned that, immediately where my head went was, you see all of these various kinds of traffic, and right here you have cars weaving in and out of people and like going back and forth. They don't even know which side they're supposed to be on. There's the two white cars passing each other. It's fascinating.
It is. I just came back from South America, and I was trying to figure out how all the people on the motor scooters weren't being killed, because they're pulling in front of the Uber drivers with maybe a 2-inch gap and then turning and stopping. And the guy I was riding with there, who was a pretty good driver, he started yelling. He goes, "Look at these idiots." And I said, "Yeah, it's shocking that." And one of them told me, he says, "Yeah, they've killed at least 5 or 6 motor scooter riders a day down there where I was at." And it was incredible to me. So you don't see it that bad in the US until you get into areas like I-95 throughout Florida, or California, in that area. You're on the 5 or the 10, or you're up in some of the DC and the East Coast really bad areas where everybody drives crazy. I have to say, Florida's may have the worst drivers I've ever seen. And I've seen one day.
My sister-in-law in Connecticut, and I'll say they're good drivers. They speed limits are a suggestion up there.
No. When you're driving on I-95, if you actually are going in a slow lane where you're going 10 mile an hour and you want to switch lanes, the people will come up beside you going over 100 mile an hour, and if you pull out in front of them, you're dead. So I see that constantly. I'm just shocked the whole time. So I'm extremely careful. I won't use my phone. I won't text. I pay very clear attention to everybody around me in defensive driving, and I'd rather be in a very fast, reactive car than some sluggish vehicle when I'm on I-95, because of the huge danger to people.
One other question I have for you, and we'll start wrapping this up because I've already taken up a ton of your time this afternoon, but you're talking about untrained drivers, especially Uber and Lyft. But you had mentioned something the other day that I was taking notes on, because again, I find you a wealth of knowledge. I actually really enjoyed our conversations. And you were telling me school buses are another area where you actually find a surprisingly large number of more or less untrained drivers, which I find fascinating and terrifying, because of course we're entrusting the future of our country, the future of our family. We send our kids to school in a school bus. And you were telling me that the vast majority of those oftentimes are untrained or very poorly trained drivers. Can you just weigh in on that a little bit? Because I'm sure people would want to know this. I mean, it's important to know. Again, you don't know your rights. The slogan of of my show is you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. But at the same time, knowledge of the situations you're getting into is how you affect the future as well, how you affect what choices you're going to make, and being and informed consent is very, very important. So I think people who send their kids to school in a school bus, just like if you're taking an Uber, you should have informed consent that says, "Hey, this guy's never been trained." Tell me about school buses.
Sure. I mean, we have, there's two major companies that have been here that I've seen. Durham School Services, another one called First Student. You got to remember that, at least in Kansas, they're not requiring seatbelts for the students in the buses. So when they have a wreck, the kids are thrown everywhere and they can be hurt badly. Because it is school, it means that these are part-time drivers. So many of them are doing supplemental jobs and they don't get full-time work. Best they might do 34, 35 hours a week. And their training is almost zero. So when we're taking depositions of the training personnel and the supervisory management, they've always got a book that says they train on it. But that doesn't mean they actually do. It means it's there for use in lawsuits and things like that. And when you start questioning the drivers, never seen that book, never tested over the book. I don't understand the rules you're asking me. I really didn't do very well. It took me 3 times to pass the driver's license exam. And they put those people, your children's lives, into their hands. And that's why you see massive catastrophic bus accidents all over the entire US, because you have untrained and unsupervised poor drivers with bad records doing part-time driving, and it's a recipe for disaster. So you have to, that's one of our focuses, is those type of cases, because again, I go back to the same thing I said before. It's negligent hiring, negligent training, and negligent supervision. And that's a focus of every case we have with a business vehicle, because that's why they happen. There's really been stupidity for the drivers, driving too much, but the most of it is managerial in nature, and that's why the companies are always liable for what their drivers do, and they try to protect themselves with independent contractor agreements, and we get around those constantly. They have zero effect on suing the companies that they're driving for, which is a big
Sounds
area.
like one of the big issues is just everyone's trying to cover their own behinds.
Correct. I mean, nobody likes lawyers. I'm a lawyer. I've got some friends that are lawyers, but I don't personally like lawyers. If I was going to pick a profession of people to hang out with, it probably wouldn't be lawyers. But again, we've got our board members, a bunch of people that we have like minds, similar thought processes. So out of thousands of lawyers here in Kansas, there's several of us that are similar and we like each other. And then in the general world scheme of things, you've got the American Association for Justice. And like for us, we got the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association. And those are attorneys trying to better society and help people make things better. And the problem with that is that everything in this world is run by insurance companies who own us. They own everything. They control the government, the lobbyists, the presidents, the senators, the congressmen. There's so much unjust crap that goes on that it's hard to explain it in one little show. So I'm not a big believer in justice. I think the way you get justice is you find a lawyer that actually will get you justice. And if you don't have that, then you're either going to jail or you're not going to have any recovery because you hired somebody that doesn't give a crap about you. So you have to, the common person doesn't know any of this, so it's one of those things that people once they're in the accident, their legs cut off or their arms cut off or they're paralyzed, all of a sudden they learn this, or their loved one, their spouse, their child, their dad, their mother is killed for the first time in their life. They understand the importance of having an advocate on your side, and not until that point. So that's why I think there's kind of a deep-seated dislike of lawyers by the common public until they need one. And when they need one, then all of a sudden we're like,
You're the best friend all of a sudden.
correct. You're the cream in the cup. Or, you're something that they actually need. And then all of a sudden we're not so bad. But to the rest of society, they look at us like we're kind of I'm careful when I'm talking to new groups of people when I'm on vacation, like in a swimming pool, at a hotel. When everybody's saying what they do, I don't tell them I'm a lawyer, because if I do, all of a sudden I find a lot of them won't speak any longer to me because of that deep-seated dislike generally for lawyers. And so it's a lot better to say, I'm in marketing, and then you don't have that go on. But there are those people that understand the need for us. And those generally are the people that are most hurt or have a legal problem, and they need somebody that gives a shit. Honestly. And until you have that, you don't really have a lawyer. So that's the problem, is separating out those lawyers that care from those that don't. And it's hard to tell you what the percentage of those that truly care are, but it's probably less than 20% of the entire legal population in the US. Now, a lot of lawyers get mad at that statement because they do care about their work, but I'm talking about the average guy that says, yeah, I'm a trial lawyer, but they don't actually do the work. They don't walk the walk and talk the talk. They say they are something that they're not, those are the ones that give us a bad reputation.
You know what they say, it's 99% of lawyers that give the rest of them a bad name. So
correct. And it's I mean, I got to qualify this. I have many attorney friends and many lawyers that I really trust them, rely on them for, we kick cases around. But they're a very small group of people that I can call and say, hey man, I've got this hypothetical set of facts. Can you help me with this? And they actually understand it, or they can give me any good advice on it. So that's where you get into, while we join these groups of board meetings and stuff, so we can share very complicated theories with the few lawyers that care about that.
totally random question, but I sort of went down that road a second ago. Do you have a favorite lawyer joke?
Oh my God.
As Mary Poppins says, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So I think sometimes a little bit of self-deprecating humor is wonderful.
I don't know if I'm not a good joke teller, but it's how many lawyers does it take to screw in a light bulb? And I'll put this into an actual scenario. When I have corporate work, I hire a very well-known law firm here. I won't say their name. And one day I called over to talk about an issue. And I said, wait a minute, how many of you guys are in the room? Because I only want one bill for this conversation. And 5 of them laughed, and I know them all. And I said, okay, one bill from Chuck, nobody else. I care if you're in the room. So you have to, even for us, if we hire lawyers to do things for us on a corporate basis, we have to be guarded ourselves. Because you find many lawyers tend to bill plaintiffs' lawyers higher than anyone else. And it's I don't know, it's just a weird system that we have. But like around here, the Bar Association, Wichita, for the most part, is a really good group of guys and women. And there are very few bad lawyers that we run into here. It's a very small bar. I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 people in the city bar. Most of the judges we know by first name. The federal judges we know. We socialize, at legal and judicial events that they hold where lawyers can meet with the judges, because typically you don't socialize with them. And those places, you get a feel for the camaraderie that you have. And there's some very, very wonderful judges in this area, both state and federal court, that really care. And when you have those, it makes life easier, because when you have a fair judge, you have a sense of fairness to the entire system, and you don't just get blindsided by somebody that's only trying to help one side. And that happens. And when I was younger, it happened a lot. As I got older, it didn't happen so much. But when you're young and I wouldn't say young and dumb, but before you're accepted as an equal, those judges give you a massive amount of problems trying to prove to them that you're worthy of their consideration. So I've watched some younger attorneys get chewed out in court and feel so sorry for them, because they're 1 or 2 years out, and the judge will be somebody that's 65 years old, and he's tired of listening to crap from some young lawyer that doesn't know what they're talking about. And they can get pretty vicious if they want to. So I learned a long time ago, massive respect for the judiciary, because they are pretty much in control of your whole case and your life. So you have to, if you don't give the judges respect, you can't help your client. Very, very important thing for people to remember. All lawyers that do trial work know that. I don't care whether it's criminal defense.
Instinctively pick up on.
Well, you just know. I mean, it's when I was young, I'd say something stupid that I regretted. Luckily, never got sanctioned where I had to pay the sanction. But I learned not to ever say that again. So it's just as you go through life, the older you get, if you're paying attention, this truly is listen to your elders, the wiser, older people that have done all this stuff, because I learn new things every single day, even at age 68. And if you stop learning, you might as well quit practicing law, because that you're no use to anyone at that point.
I agree. I think it can actually make you less sharp as an individual too. We have this idea of retiring, and obviously everyone wants to spend their golden years not having to work, obviously. But I think if you stop working, you lose mental acuity. My father-in-law is a medical doctor he's been practicing for 40 years, probably as long as you've been lawyering. He says the same thing. He says, I intend to practice medicine until the day I literally can't practice medicine anymore. And you want to have the freedom that when you can't, you can step away. But yeah, you got to always be learning, always be on your game, always stay sharp, because if you don't lose it, you don't use it, you lose it. And it's the same with your intelligence, your expertise, and everything else.
I agree fully. If I don't take more than 5 days off for a vacation and go anywhere. The only time I had was my honeymoon 26 years ago, where it took 10 days. So if I go anywhere for 5 days, I'm bored out of my mind. I have to have my mind kept enthralled with new facts and problems and issues in order to stay focused and have the ability to think through new ways to win things, and think up new theories that help your clients. Without that, you turn into mush. So I've got a lot of friends that want to retire, and I said, I don't think you really realize what you're talking about, because they go, oh yeah, no, I want to retire. And I said, it isn't going to be as wonderful as you think, because I know a lot of people retired and they went right back to it because they couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if you could sit on a boat for the rest of your life and travel the world, I'd get bored with that in 30 days. And be,
I was gonna say, yeah, you take a nice long vacation. Take a month-long vacation if you need, but I think getting back to the
correct.
grind sometimes is important. Keeps you focused. Well, Brad, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half, and I don't want to monopolize your entire afternoon. I know that you are a busy man, and I appreciate the time. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask you my two closing questions. I'm going to give those to you right now so you can percolate on them, and then I'm going to jump back over, take a look at your site, and read from our last sponsor. Question number one will be, if you can give young Brad some advice, jump back in time to 1981, and say 81, that would be Empire Strikes Back, I think, is in the theaters right now, and you're able to
Well,
give yourself some advice other than the obvious, which is trust me, in like 30 years, there's going to be this thing called Bitcoin, buy a lot of it and hold it. Outside of that, what advice would you give yourself and why? And of course, by extension, maybe someone who's green behind the gills, but just starting their law profession. And then question number two is, if I gave you my magic pen, and with this pen, you could strike a law from the books, edit a law that's on the books, or add a new law to the books, what law would you add, edit, or delete, and why? While you percolate on that, let's jump back over and take a look at your website. As a reminder, I am talking with Brad Pistotnik. He is the CEO, founder, provider of Bull Attorneys, along with his partner, Tony. There's other attorneys there as well, but they're the guys that get top billing on the page. You can visit them online at bullattorneys.com. If you have been injured in any kind of a trucking accident, call 1-800-WIN-BULL. That's WINBULL, or call them locally in Wichita at 316-684-4400. As always, we'll have a link down below in the description. You can also visit Truck Accident Lawyers Group. We'll have a link to them as well. 316-330-9200. That's 316-330-9200. truckaccidentlawyersgroup.com. If you have been injured, particularly in a motor vehicle case, particularly in a truck accident case, Brad is the guy to talk to, especially if you're in the Midwest, but he can work with you almost anywhere. So please feel free to reach out to him. And again, link in the description down below. Our final sponsor for the day is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more dumb luck than science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP News, Business Insider, and others, and see those articles ranking nationally, locally, sometimes in as little as 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people are looking for? What else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful, guaranteed way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and permanently. It's functionally guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, visit rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one of Google in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers or clients with rankwithnews.com. All righty. So, Brad, we were able to jump back in time. We meet a young Brad Pistotnik. He freshly out of seeing the new Star Wars movie, or whatever was really popular in 1981, 82. You're able to go over and whisper just a couple of words of wisdom in your ear. What advice are you going to give yourself?
The first advice that I would give young Brad would be that you need to really read a lot more medical textbooks and safety and risk management books so you can understand the entire system of risk management and safety, and understand that you can't take a deposition of a physician unless you've read the medical textbook that they learned with, so you can speak in their own language. It took me a while to learn that, but I have an entire medical library. I've got thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed articles, and my doctor friends will ask me, how the hell do I know that? And I said, because I read medical peer-reviewed journals constantly every single day on my case topics with the injuries they have, so I can figure out how to help heal my clients, because I get them to doctors that actually have a specialty in their area that can help them the best. And if I'd have known that back in the first 5-6 years of my practice, I would have probably been tenfold larger than we are now.
Advice. That's can't argue with that. So This is a magic pen. I'm going to say it's a miraculous pen. I'm going to give a free shout out to St. Benedict's Abbey in Atchison, Kansas. It is a group of Benedictine monks, and their website is kansasmonks.org. But one of the priests must have blessed this pen because I found that it has magical or maybe miraculous properties, which is to say, it allows you to strike a law from the books, edit a law in the books, or add a new law. So if I were to loan you this miraculous pen, Brad, and you could make one change, what change would you make and why?
Oh, I would strike the collateral source doctrine that prevents a jury from hearing that the defendant or the motor carrier or the doctor, whoever it is we're suing, has massive amounts of insurance to pay for this. So you don't get into a hometown situation. Done a lot of medical negligence cases and nursing home negligence. And you bring cases in small towns and rural areas, and the local jury thinks you're going to lose your hospital or your doctor if they award a verdict because it's going to drive them out of town. And the truth is, they may have $10 million of insurance. So, somewhere along the magic line, the insurance companies developed this theory that they should never hear that, and that lobbyists started promoting those, interstate, every state almost adopted the same rules. That would be stricken in a second. So everybody knows the true facts of what you're actually doing, and you're not harming this individual because they have more money than they need for insurance coverage. And all you're doing is protecting the insurance company, which is inherently wrong to me. I hate insurance companies. They are the root of all evil in the U.S. So they're one of the reasons that we have such problems, because they control our healthcare. They control whether we get medications, whether we get a surgery. When my clients, whether they'll even, if somebody's got a ruptured disc in the neck, they can say, no, you can't have the surgery because you haven't gone through 2 months of unnecessary therapy first. So I'd get rid of insurance company defenses that are nonsensical and illogical.
I think that's fair. And insurance is funny because it's kind of a necessary evil, and I'm glad that it exists because it is there to protect us. But people forget they're a business and their ultimate job is profitability, and they are there to spend as little as possible in the process of settling whatever claims need to be settled. So 100%, it is good to have someone on your side like yourself that is in your corner and fighting for your rights. Well, Brad, thank you very much for meeting with me today. We've had a nice long conversation. I appreciate you giving me a lot of time today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word. Is there any last words or parting wisdom or advice that you'd like to let our listeners have?
Sure, Justin, thank you. It would be that if you have a person, a relative, a close friend, family member that has a significant injury, you need to think about who you're hiring and figure out whether or not they have ever had success at trial, whether they have enough money to build your case. And some of these cases take a couple $100,000 out of our pocket to build. Or if you're hiring some one-man show that doesn't have enough money to help your family. It's a very, very important thought process that no one actually understands that until it's too late. So you have to find somebody that is an intellectual person with extreme high levels of training in the type of accident you have, that has sufficient monetary capacity to pay for all the experts, and that is compassionate. And to find that match is very difficult. So that would be my advice to everyone that needs an attorney for any type of a catastrophic loss, or even a moderate injury or loss. Because
well, and I will do this as well. Always reach out, because almost every attorney, I know you guys work this way, will give you a free consultation, right? And as I often say, I'll say it again in a minute, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And, if you got injured, you might have 7 days to save the footage that proves your case. So the sooner you get rolling with someone who's an expert in this field, the better off you're going to be. So always get that advice 100% and make sure that it's somebody that's a dedicated, competent, experienced attorney. So I agree with
Exactly.
that 100%.
That's so important. Time is truly of the essence in these cases. So the longer somebody screws around and waits, the worse their chances of recovery are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Justin West. This is the Attorney Post. If you're listening to our podcast on any of the major podcast repositories, feel free to rate us, leave a comment, subscribe, whatever makes sense. If you're on YouTube, a like, a subscribe, and a share are always important. Also, if you know somebody that would benefit from hearing this information, feel free to share this information with them because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Again, this has been the Attorney Post. I have been chatting with Brad Pistotnik, who runs Bull Attorneys, that is bullattorneys.com, and truckaccidentlawyersgroup.com as well. Links, as always, in the description down below. Although this podcast does deal with a lot of different legal topics, of course, this podcast does not itself constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. However, if you've been injured in a trucking accident injury, quite obviously, I think Brad and his firm would be a wonderful resource for you. So again, please feel free to reach out to them. Bullattorneys.com, 800-WIN-BULL. All the other information is down below. And until next time, this is Justin reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys. And until next time, bye-bye.